Hey there, it's Kari at StudioR12 Stencils. Today we have some design ideas for you to paint a layered forest for any season. Today we are showing you how to use our 4-part tree stencil to give you a layered, really foresty look on your project. So this stencil comes with 4 parts and they are labeled layer 1, paint first, layer 2, paint second. So we already took out all of the guesswork for you and are easily showing you how to get this finished look. And then you can use some pieces of it, you can use all the pieces of it, you can use these designs on other projects. That's what makes stenciling fun. So today, for this video, we are painting a winter theme. However, I also wanted to show you some other design ideas for this. So we have a Country Roads Take Me Home. And for the background of this one, I just used a bunch of browns and a bunch of stains and used my polyfoam brush and just did really light layers. And then we have our layers for the trees, and then our Country Roads Take Me Home, which I only used part of this stencil. I took off the little brackets around the outside. So it's a way that you can use bits and pieces of your stencil without using the full one. And then we also have a Live Love Lake, which I did blue on the bottom, a cream on the top. I had a happy accident with this project. We always talk about if you have fresh paint, you might not want to use tape. I did not listen to my own advice and I taped off so I could paint the bottom half blue. I pulled off the tape and then had this really pocked, rustic looking cream on top and did not panic. Instead, I went and got more tape and quickly used the tape over top of the rest of the surface while the paint was still fresh and pulled back paint in small layers. And I actually love how it turned out. I feel like it really works for a lake theme that you have this hanging outside by the water. It's got a little damage from all of the elements, so it turned out really well. And I also like how the trees pop against the blue. So we have a couple of different everyday options that you could use, but today we're showing you how to do it with a winter theme. I have already base coated my surface using number 72. Don't forget, you can get the StudioR12 paint color guide. So we get often asked, what type of paint do you use? We love deco art paint. We paint in bulk. So we buy house paint from Sherwin-Williams and put them in our little honey bottles, which you can get off Amazon. And I will share a link for that. I will also share a link for our paint color guide. So when I say we use number 72, you can go to the paint color guide, look at number 72 on here, and it has a corresponding color for deco art for Sherwin-Williams. It has a hex code if you do some work online. So we have tried to start saying what colors we are using in case you want to paint things the same way we are. So typically when we paint winter projects, we finish it off with a little bit of snow, but this one we are going to start with the snow. We are using a really gnarly little sponge that we are going to put our bed of snow for our trees, and then we are also going to spatter. So when we are using one of these sponges, and you can get these on our website, StudioR12.com, we will get it just a little bit wet, and then we will dampen it off. Be careful not to get water on your surface, because then that will take away your paint. So now I have it just a little bit wet. And then what I'll probably do is do a mix of a wet and dry sponge. I'm going to add some white paint, and I'm going to find an area of my sponge that I like, and I'm going to put some paint on it and dab it off. I'm dabbing it because I don't want it to be super coveragey. So I'm just coming here, hardly touching this at all. And then you'll also want to move your wrist around. If you do it all in the same direction, then you will have a pattern, and we are looking for a snowy ground background that has a little bit of texture and has a natural feel. Yes, you could just go ahead and paint white on this background to make it like a complete bed of snow, but I want to do something a little bit different than we did on the other ones and give a different look, a different base for our trees. So now I'm going to find a different part of my sponge just to get a different look. And I'm just going to fold it here a little bit, get a little bit more paint, dab it off, and then go back in here. So I'm going to probably do several layers of this because I don't want the blue to show through. I want it to look more of a ground coverage. So I'm going to do a few layers of this and then we'll show you how it turns out. I did end up grabbing a dry sponge just to see the difference that it would make. And since it is dry, it is offering more of a thicker coverage. So if you want a softer coverage, having the wet sponge is beneficial. If you're wanting more of an overall coverage that is still a sponge look, but not necessarily a foam brush look, this is a good option to use a dry one. So we are finishing up our layers. I think I've done 4 layers, 2 with the wet, 2 with the dry, just moving around the paint. And I am going up on my surface a little bit and just feathering this in because it's going to be snow. So we don't want really a hard stop line. And now I'm going to put both of my sponges in the water bucket. When you clean your sponges, you just put them under running water and squeeze, 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 squeeze until they come clean. You do not want to use soap because then you will have probably soapy projects for the rest of your life that you use those sponges. Now we are going to go into a different kind of snow. I'm putting some white on my palette paper. I'm getting a White Wonder, which is our favorite spatter brush. We are adding water to our white paint. We want an inky texture so that we get those spatters that we want. I'm just gonna add a little bit here, and don't forget, when you spatter, you always need to practice before you hit your surface so you can see the size of the spatters that are going to happen. This is a little wet and they're bigger than what I like, so I'm going to keep spattering off just to get some of this off of my brush. And then we are using our big dome brush as an anchor, and we are just going to spatter all along the background. So now we are having a snowy background over our night sky. If you want bigger spatters, you'll have more paint on your brush. If you want smaller spatters, then you will just continue to spatter off the edge on your practice until you get the consistency that you like. Doesn't this look like a snow globe? I am so happy with how this is turning out. If you have an area that you don't feel like has enough spatters, you can move your brush closer to the board and have a little bit more control over where it goes. All right, I think I am super happy with those spatters, but now we have to take a break because spatters take a while to dry. So we'll let these dry and we'll be back. It has been about 45 minutes. Our spatters are dry. We took a walk. We are clear-headed and ready to paint. So the next thing we want to do is lay out the stencils for this project. Our trees are going to be layered and stacked. So I want to see where I can start them and make sure they end where I want them. So I'm going to put our Welcome to Our Wonderland here. You can use a T-square to make sure it's in the center. You can eyeball it. I am eyeballing it. I'm looking here where this loop is and where this loop is to see if they're about the same. And then we're going to start working on our tree. So the first one I'm going to lay down is where it says part 1 of 4. So it looks like when I painted this on my other ones, I did it with it upside down, which is completely fine. Does not matter one way or the other unless you are thinking about flipping it over and doing it different. If you're doing it within one project, you'll need to make sure to wipe it clean or make sure to let it dry so you don't get paint if you're going to flip it over. I'm happy with this. So I have my top of the tallest tree is coming kind of close to my D, so we're good there. Number 2, and it comes here, and you can line these up wherever you want. So our third layer comes here, and so we do have some off of the background. If you like one tree more than the other, you can move it around. And then number 4. So our number 4, the base of the bottom one is going to be right at the bottom of this project. I'm going to do it a little right justified here. There. So this is what this will look like when we start painting if they were all layered on top of each other. But now we know where we want our base pieces to be. So I'm going to go ahead and tape those down because I like the placement of them. Our snow was in 27 and our Welcome to Our Winter Wonderland is also going to be in 27. And we're just going to do a basic how to stencil. We're going to use our dome brush, put it in our paint, come to our paper towel and offload. And then we are going to start swirling. And I am going to do the snowflakes on this. You can choose to do the snowflakes or you could choose to just do the words. If you are just going to do the words, I would recommend taping off the snowflakes so that you don't forget or so that you don't ghost into them. So the ghosting would be you accidentally painted it when you didn't mean to. On one of the other projects, I did that and I just put my finger over here to kind of be a mask rather than to tape it. But I have found that if I don't tape it, I typically forget and then I have to clean up my mess. We do have a video on how to fix stencil mistakes, and I will share the link to that. I'll just go ahead and tell you your key is water. So water is going to be your best friend, and then we'll show you our favorite tool for fixing stencil mistakes. So one thing I just did that I want to bring to your attention is when I was painting this, I started with my W and then I went up to the Welcome to Our, and then I went to my snowflakes, and then I came back down to the second row. If you're going to be a little helter-skelter about how you are painting, make sure that you remember to do the same way on your second layer than your first, because if I would have just started with my winter and went straight across, that paint was going to still be wet because I finished right here. So however you're going to do it, just make sure you do it in the same pattern each time. So let's peel this back just a little bit so you can see what it looks like. Welcome to our winter wonderland. It would have been really cute also to do that in a light blue. I think I might do that. Just a hint of light blue. And we're gonna come into our paint, and this time I am going to stipple just to get a good coverage on there. We already have a couple layers of white that's going to help this lighter color pop. And you could choose to leave your snowflakes white, or you can go ahead and make them blue. So let's see what this looks like. So then that gives it not really a color, but it does make it pop a little more compared to what the white was looking like. Okay, I'm going to leave the stencil on just because they're taped together, but we can peel it back and see. Welcome to our winter wonderland. Very pretty. Now let's get to the trees. So these trees are not hard to paint. If you are doing couple of different colors, which I'm going to do, then you can jump back and forth and maybe mix the colors a little bit to put them in the same family. I was pretty flexible with how I did these two. I didn't really have a rhyme or reason. I did think about if I have a light tree on the bottom layer, I will probably paint a darker tree on the next layer right over top of it, just so we had some different colors playing against each other, but I wasn't super strict with myself. I just kind of let it be. The greens that I am using are 54 is the light green, 43 is the middle green, and 42 is the dark green. And they're kind of all in the same palette. The light green's a little brighter, so what I will probably do is mix my light green and my middle green together a little bit. I did use some different brushes, so I'm going to get out 3 in case I want to use them, but it's also nice with using a combo of paints to use one brush, and then you can be all in the same color family. If you want them to be precisely different colors, use different brushes. But I'm going to start probably with my middle green, and I'm going to offload, and then I'm going to stipple. I prefer to stipple when I am painting shapes. When I'm painting words, I typically will swirl first, but with shapes and with stencils with lots of layers, I will typically stipple just to get coverage, especially over the snow on this background. So I used the middle green on my left tree. On my right tree, I'm going to use the same brush and go into a little bit of a darker green. And they will be similar since I still have the middle green on my brush. Now with this painting over the snow, you are probably going to want to do 2 layers. So keep that in mind when you are picking your colors and deciding what color you want to use for what tree. If you have a lot, it's sometimes easy to forget which tree was which color. So you might want to let it dry, do your second layer, and then go into the next tree. Especially over the parts that are snowy, probably want to do a second layer. You can mask these off if you want. You can use the multi-masker, you can use your finger. I am not super concerned about masking off. If it does ghost from one tree to the other, with this stencil specifically, I am okay with that because then it's going to look like one tree is in front of the other tree. So let's look at what this looks like so far. There we go. We have our first layer of trees. And then we're going to just work our way across. I'm going to go into a very light tree for our next one. And then we're going to pull it up and see what this light color looks like compared to the other two and see if it looks good with it. I do have enough paint on my brush that it is covering quite a bit. I did find when I was practicing doing these that I didn't necessarily have to offload as much because all of the trees are really gnarly. So if you do bleed under, it might not kill your project because you might not be able to tell. But let's pull this back, and I think those look pretty good together. So now I'm going to go back into, let's go into the dark green. And then now I'm just going to kind of mix and match and do each tree. And then when it comes to the bases, I'm just going to grab a smaller brush. This is a 1/2 inch. Come into my brown and then just go across my base. All right, I'm gonna get this layer done and then we'll peel it off and I'll show you how to do layer 2. In my samples, as I was trying things out, I didn't do a lot of full coverage with my trees, and some of them are super layered. This was the first project I painted, and you could tell I was trying things out. A couple of these trees, you can still see the layers behind. which is okay, but I think for this project, I want to make sure that my trees are not transparent at all. And voila! Make sure that your paint is completely dry before putting on your second layer. And then the beauty of this is you can put this up high, you can put it down low. I want my top layer to be a little bit higher. And then actually going into my second layer, looking at my first, I think I'm gonna actually put it higher than what I did on that one, just to give it a little more meat up top. And then we just might have a little extra space at the bottom. I'm going to take my tape off of my other stencil, so we're not wasting tape. Now, you do want to be careful. So when I was doing this and I accidentally pulled the paint off, since we've already used this tape once, it's not as sticky. But you can also put it on your apron or put it on your jeans. It will still be sticky enough to stick to your project, but won't be sticky enough to pull up the paint. And then we're just not going to push it down very far. Since we used the middle colors on these trees, I'm going to go into my lighter color by itself and come into this tree so that we have different colors layered on top of each other. And you can use the same brush to mix just on your palette. A lot of times when we talk about mixing, we'll get out the palette knife, but for this project, I'm just brush mixing because there's not a real specific color I'm looking for. I'm going to go into my other brush, into my dark color. And I didn't use a super duper dark green like I did on this project. On both of these, I really liked the green that almost looked black on those. But since our background is the navy, I was afraid that that dark green wasn't going to pop. So you'll want to make sure that you're putting your colors side by side, seeing how they look, testing things out, maybe having a test board that you're using, so then you can see how they look together. I'm going to use my dark brush and then go into my light and medium and then mix it right on my paper towel for this next tree. And since we are stippling and since we are mixing paint colors, then we do have quite a bit more paint on our brush, which means our projects are going to be a little more wet with our paint. And because of that, it is going to take a little bit longer to dry, which means we're going to have to wait a little bit before we go back into our second and third layers. So you can use a blow dryer if you are wanting to do them one tree at a time so that you can use the same colors, or you can just do all the trees and then go back and fill in what you like. There are 3 trees in the middle of it's open. So I'm just coming through here with my colors and kind of feathering them in along the way. It's kind of like the ombre look that Lena painted recently with her lemons. And since the paint is wet, I'm just working it across so that it looks like those trees are just kind of layered together. So now that I'm pulling this back, those are all pretty similar. So what I'm going to do is I am going to get out my palette knife and I'm going to get out a little bit of a darker green, this number 51, which is very close to being black. And I'm just going to pull in a little bit of it to this number 42 that I have. So 51 and 42. And mix those together. This gives us a little bit more of a differentiating color when it's side by side, the other ones. We'll come back here and then come on to our tree. And it's going to be a little bit darker. And then I could even come into this dark green and we can see what it looks like compared to that navy blue background. And then also with using the same brushes, while we are mixing the colors together, it does also give it a textured look so it looks like the trees have branches. And while this is still on, I'm gonna go ahead and do my tree stumps. And then since I wasn't super cautious about ghosting, I'm just gonna come back through here with my green and then come back through here with my light green just to even it all out. And then we're very carefully going to peel this up because our paint's still wet. So then we have a second layer of trees. So now we just keep layering on our trees. I do need to let this dry. So now I'm ready to go into layer 3. Layer 3 has a lot of open stencils and I want them to be quite a bit lower. So I'm gonna come in here, grab my tape. And this one over here is a light green. So I'm actually going to start with a super dark, my number 51. So now that we are getting closer to the bottom, this dark green will pop a little more because it has the snow background or the background of the trees and isn't going to be fighting the navy blue. I'm going into the middle green mixed with my darkish green here. And now I'm just kind of flipping, flopping back and forth, doing some different colors, trying to make it layered. I love how these turn out. I can't wait to see how this one does with all of our snow. Something Steve and I were talking about off camera is, did we want to add our spattered snow with the stencil on or the stencil off? So we decided to do it with the stencil off because one time, if you do it with the stencil on, then you're going to have to wait between each layer for it to dry. But we also thought that in the long run, it's all going to be spattered anyway, so we didn't necessarily need a spatter through each layer. However, if you do want it to be really snowy and maybe use a sponge to get your snow, maybe you will want to keep the stencil on while you're doing that so that you can get the sponged snow just through the tree part and not in the background. I am going to grab another brush to go into my dark. When you do your brush mixing, sometimes you lose the integrity of that really dark color. I want to come back into it and then go into it as well over here. This project does take quite a bit of paper towel since we're doing so much mixing on our paper towel. And it's taken me a little more paint than I expected. I'm happy to be able to add to it though, rather than throw away a bunch of paint. If you would have any interest in me showing videos on how I painted the backgrounds for the Country Roads Take Me Home or the Live Love Lake to get those techniques, please let us know in the comments. We always are interested to see what you are interested in learning. I went ahead and put light on without thinking about it, and I already have a light tree here. So I'm just going to go back into my super dark, my 51, and do a dark over this, and we'll just anchor both sides of this project with that dark paint. So you can see here, this one's a little bit darker than what I am painting now, and that's because I didn't remember what color I painted there. I was just kind of going by sight. But now it looks like our trees have some layers, and I'm okay with that. Now we're ready to do our stumps. All right, let's pull off layer number 3. Ta-da! So now we have 3 layers of trees. It looks like a nice, beautiful woodsy scene, and we have one more to go. We're gonna blow dry, and then we'll be doing our last layer of trees. Okay, so as I'm putting my 4th layer on, trying to decide where it goes, I like the bridging of this left tree. So I definitely want it in there. So I've decided with this layer, I'm only going to do one tree at a time. So I can also show you how to do that rather than doing them. I don't want to do this tree where it would go because it covers up that little cutie. So if I do it here, then I can pull in my really dark. So now's the time where I'm starting to think about, okay, what colors do I want to use? What trees do I want to use where? So I want to bring it here to add a little bit of bridging and some lines to this part of the project. I have a lot of light trees here and my dark green over here. So I'm gonna come into my dark green, put my tape down. It's not as straight as what I've been doing the whole time either. I'm kind of cockeying it to the right a little bit so I can get it exactly where I want. And I'm going to come into my really dark green and just give myself a really dark green tree here. So one cool thing about this is you can do these layers in whatever way that you want, and you can put the trees wherever you want. If you have another project that you're just wanting a little tree on, then use these trees. I mean, you have so many trees to choose from. You have one-offs, you have small, you have large, you have some that are bridged, you have some that are open. So that makes it really cool to be able to use these on lots of projects. So now, since we are only doing one tree at a time here, I will have to blow dry between layers to speed up the process a little. All right, so now we're peeling this one off, and that is perfect there. I love the dark pop against the light. So now I'm going to go back into this stencil, place this one just off the edge here so that the stump goes all the way to the bottom, and grab our tape. Then I'm going to paint both of these. I cannot wait to get this off of here and see how it turned out. So, fun story about this stencil. We originally started on this design in 2020. So we had the idea, we started working on it, and then it got pushed to the side. So at the time of this filming, it is 2024. This design has been a work in progress for 4 years, and we are so excited to finally bring it to life because it's an amazing stencil set to have in your collection to use all as one, to use here and there, to have different trees in different shapes and sizes. So kudos to our designer who brought this to life 4 years in the making. Let's peel this off, and ta-da, look at that. Look at all of our trees. I am glad that we started adding the darker trees toward the bottom because then it kind of anchors it. So we have the snow at the bottom, but since we brought these darker trees along here, it draws the eye toward the bottom and anchors it in, and it turned out perfectly. So now we have one more thing to do, and it is snow. So there's a lot of snow going on in our project. We have the snow on the bottom, we have the snow throughout the sky, we have our snowflakes, but our trees right now aren't snowy yet. So we are going to use our White Wonder. We are going to put out a little bit more white paint, and our water is kind of yucky. So I'm just going to use our spray bottle and spray some water onto our palette and then pull in the paint to make it the consistency we are looking for. I'm gonna get some of it off because I have a lot on there and I don't want that much as I'm spattering. Now, I don't want my Winter Wonderland to be spattered. So I'm going to grab a couple of these extra palettes, or you can just use a piece of one of your other stencils. And then we are going to keep it off of the Winter Wonderland because that looks really pretty. And the more I look at it, the more that I can tell it's light blue. So now I'm going to practice my spatter. I do want it to be a little similar to the spatter I've done before. So now we're going to come back on here. We're going to spatter our trees. Be sure that if you are spattering, that you don't have your good shoes or your purse or anything that you carry to get spattered. I always sit here when Patty's painting for our lives. and recently realized that my left shoe of one of my sets of shoes has paint spatter on it. My right shoe is typically behind the trash can and my left shoe is not. So now I have one spattered shoe and one not spattered shoe because I didn't think to hide it. So now I have to hide those shoes. Well, all my shoes. All right, and don't forget, if you want a tree with a little more spatter, if you want it to be in a specific spot on the tree, just lower your brush toward the tree, and then you can kind of anchor it and have control over where it goes. I love the layers of spatter because then it looks like maybe it has snowed recently and it also had some snow before. Don't forget, you could use a sponge through your stencil if you would want to make it more snowy like we used on the bottom background. Are you ready for the big reveal? We're gonna pull these away. Ta-da! We have the most beautiful snowy winter wonderland project that would be perfect for your home all winter long. If you love the techniques in this video and want to see more, be sure to subscribe to StudioR12 Stencils right here on YouTube. Ring the bell so you can be notified anytime we add new videos, and make sure to check out the playlist on paint spatter as well as how to use sponges on your projects.